Welcome back to Kicking Out Perfection. This is Module 5, and the topic is Cultivating Creative Relationships. You're not going to hear a lot from me video-wise on this topic, though we are going to spend quite a bit of time diving into this. Cultivating creative relationships started with our last video when I talked about what inspires us. What are we taking in? Noticing that inspiration is all about noticing the relationships we're in. I have a relationship with the rosemary bush in the moment I touch its needles and breathe in its scent. All of a sudden, we're communicating. And we were communicating as soon as I first saw or smelled it. I'm communicating with the crows outside my window when I hear their voices, when I see them fly by, when I pick their feathers up off the ground near the end of summer. I have relationships with certain paintings that have impacted me over the years. I have relationships with pieces of music. That's probably a familiar one to a lot of us. There are certain books that stay with me. Movies, stories, people. Right? So, how do we cultivate relationships? Well, we show up. We pay attention. We allow ourselves to be present with. Those are the three primary things. Everything else cascades from there. Show up, pay attention, cultivate presence with. So, I actually want to leave us with that for now. And I'll continue talking about this in the next video. So, cultivating creative relationships. I start anywhere in these three categories I'm going to outline. But for our purposes, let's start with the self. How do I cultivate a creative relationship with myself? Well, I do that in many of the ways we've already mentioned. I do that in having a relationship with art, with music, with nature. I do that in showing up for my spiritual practice. I do that in showing up for my creative practice. And the other way in which I cultivate a creative relationship with myself is allowing myself the freedom to play, allowing myself the freedom to experiment, allowing myself the spaciousness of time and attention to create. How often are you doing that for yourself? Any of these things. If you're doing very little, I'm going to encourage you to do more. It's really important. And in order to shift our relationship with perfectionism, we have to, in my opinion, step by step, commit to a deeper relationship with ourself, with desire, with our hearts, minds, and souls. So how much are you allowing yourself to feel desire, to feel passion, to be in the creative flow? Next, we cultivate a relationship with our creative practice, and we've already talked quite a bit about that and strategies to help us develop this relationship and keep it a healthy and strong one. So in this module, I want us to look at the ways in which cultivating a relationship with our creative practice still feels tentative, or still feels sidelined, shoved aside. Or we can also look at the ways in which we really are showing up for our creative practice. And maybe there are ways we can even do that in a stronger, more sustainable way. So take some time to first notice and then strategize. How am I going to deepen my relationship with my creative practice? And then the third is cultivating relationship with other creatives. So again, part of cultivating that relationship is listening to music, looking at art, watching movies, reading books, whatever. There's myriad different art forms I could name: knitting, weaving, crafting, photography, right? All of that inspired work is part of our relationship with other creatives. But there's other things too that we can look at. There are accountability buddies. One person that I check in with on a weekly or monthly basis and say, hey, here are the projects I've been working with. Here are the projects I've been struggling with. What's happening with your creative life? What are you learning? What are you creating? And then what are our goals for the next month or 3 months? And how can we continue to help each other? Or sitting down and having a cup of tea with a group of people and just talking about what it's like to create. Or having a stitch and bitch session at your local cafe. That's another way to cultivate relationships with creatives. Going on gallery tours with a group of friends. Going to see a movie and then heading out for food afterwards to discuss it. All of that can help us cultivate relationship with other creatives. And I know some of you are probably saying, I don't live in a place where I know a lot of creative people. Well, there are antidotes to that too. There are many groups online that we can hook into that discuss a variety of art forms. I love Instagram as a way to take in a flow of art on a constant basis. Now, some online groups, just like some in-person groups, devolve too much into drama, and that's part of relationships too. However, it's good to keep an eye on that and to pay attention to that and not get caught up in the swirl of drama, because that can eat our creative process. That can eat our creative time. And we don't want that. We want things that continue to serve creativity, to help us feel inspired and feel engaged with creativity. And I also want to set some of us a challenge. If you're not in a relationship with other creatives, what are some ways you could facilitate that? Could you start a monthly meetup? Could you open an online discussion? Could you say to a friend, hey, I know that I'm a photographer and you knit, and that seems really different to me, but would you care to get together and share our art? I could show you the photographs I've been working on, and you could let me feel and look at the fabulous things you've been making with fiber arts lately. The phrase "think outside the box" is a little overused, but that's part of what I'm challenging us to do. Think outside the box you've put your creativity and your creative relationships into? What happens when you open that? And the reason I'm talking about cultivating creative relationships is not only because it's healthy and helps our creativity, but because it's another way to help us kick out perfectionism. Because we see other people's process and end product. And we see that our relationship to the end product is often not their relationship with their process. And maybe they don't think their end product is so perfect. But that doesn't mean we cannot appreciate it. And it can't return some wonderful creative flow and juice our way. So I encourage us all to find ways to help ourselves and help each other kick out perfectionism and create more than we are now. Let's take a breath into that. Blessed be. Hello. Here we are back at Kicking Out Perfection, Cultivating Creative Relationships. So what about your relationship with your creative process, with your creativity itself? How are you communicating with your creativity? And what are you communicating with your creativity? How many different ways are you communicating to your creativity that it is a priority? And how many ways are you communicating that it's not a priority at all? Or a very small one? What are you centering in your life? And is creativity anywhere near that center? How do you talk to your creative process and your creative self? Are you using self-aggrandizing, inflated speak? Are you using diminishing, negative self-talk? Are you communicating by showing up? Or are you communicating by choosing to play an extra video game or watch another TV show or take care of family members or work commitments or other people's stuff over and over and over again, and never taking care with your creative process? This is another one of those questions I'm asking that's going to be different for each of us when we decide to take the time to look at it, listen to it, feel it, and answer this question. For some of us, it may feel simple. We know the answers. For others of us, we've been avoiding the answers. Not good or bad. It's just what is. So let's be with what is. And let's take a breath, recenter, and as we seek this knowledge, let us also seek the ways to establish a healthier, more sustainable relationship with our creative process. And next time we ask ourselves, am I making my creativity a priority? I sincerely hope the answer for each of us is going to be a resounding yes. I'm going to continue kicking perfectionism out of my office, of my workspace, of my creative realm. I'm going to keep kicking out perfectionism from how I think about and talk about my creativity. I'm going to cultivate true, deep relationship. And I'm going to create. So, let's create.